On the 27th of February 1601, at Tyburn in London, the infamous site of execution inside of London, a woman was led towards the gallows for her execution. This lady later became a saint, and she had been found guilty of sheltering and hiding priests, which was during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. Anne Lyne was one of a number of people executed that day, and she claimed that she would have helped many more priests if she could have done. The religious rules inside of Elizabethan England led to many people's executions, and Elizabeth I even established a group of spies who were there to hunt down religious criminals who were subverting the Queen's policies with regards to the church. But why was Anne Lyne condemned, and what did she do that led her to being taken to London's terrifying site of execution? Anne Lyne was born around 1563 in Essex, and it's believed that her birth name was Alice Hyam. She was the daughter of a Puritan and the granddaughter of an MP, a man who during the reign of King Henry VIII made a number of contributions to the changes to the church throughout of Henry's reign. She was, it's believed, in the early 1580s converted to the Catholic Church along with her brother and the man she later married, Roger Lyne. But because of their conversion, her husband was disinherited and Anne lost her dowry. But this was roughly when she became known as Anne, and she left her birth name of Alice behind her. Anne's husband Roger was arrested and was imprisoned and fined for attending Catholic Mass along with Anne's brother, and Roger found himself banished from England, and he was then sent to live in Flanders. This left Anne on her own in England, her husband many miles away, and she did get a small amount of money from the King of Spain to live on. But John Gerard, the Jesuit priest around this time, began to open a house for those priests who were hiding to escape the religious persecution of Elizabeth I's reign. When Elizabeth came onto the throne, she got rid of the Catholic faith as the religion of England, like her father and half-brother had done, and she repealed all of the laws relating to Mary I's restoration of Catholicism. Mary I was, of course, Elizabeth's half-sister, and she was known as Bloody Mary for her burnings of Protestants across England. But Elizabeth I's reign was very dangerous for Catholics. Despite trying to reach a religious settlement, Catholicism was outlawed, and much of the worship went underground, and holding a mass as well as hiding Catholic priests was a crime, which was punishable by death. It was a very serious offence, especially as many Catholics believed that Elizabeth I should not have been the Queen, and they thought of Mary, Queen of Scots, the Catholic former Queen, should have ruled. Mary was executed upon the orders of Elizabeth, but many Catholic priests would conduct Mass in secret, and some houses even had priest holes and hiding spaces made to ensure when the authorities came they could be concealed. John Gerard's house for hiding priests and for continuing Catholic worship was run by Anne Lyne, and she was seen as a skilled woman who could keep this quiet. For 3 years, Anne ran the house following becoming a widow, and she even did this when Gerard was locked up inside the Tower of London. She wasn't very well at the time, and Gerard would escape from the Tower of London. Regarding this, he wrote that, "After my escape from prison, Anne Lyne gave up managing the house. By then she was known to so many people that it was unsafe for me to frequent any house that she occupied. Instead, she hired apartments in another building and continued to shelter priests there. One day, however, it was the purification of Our Blessed Lady, she allowed in an unusually large number of Catholics to hear Mass. Some neighbours noticed the crowd, and the constables were at the house at once. But the house that Anne Lyne was running would be raided. Anne was arrested on the 2nd of February 1601, and when the authorities burst in, they came across a priest conducting a service. The priest actually managed to hide out in a hiding place, but Anne was arrested, as was another woman named Margaret Gage, who was actually released on bail. Anne Lyne was sent to Newgate Prison, and she was then brought to the Sessions House in Old Bailey Lane in London on the 26th of February 1601, and she was at the time very ill. She had to be carried into the courtroom on a chair, as she had a very bad fever, and when she told the judge that her only regret was that she could not have helped 1,000 more priests who needed her help, the judge then sentenced her to death, and she was found guilty of assisting a seminary priest. She was sent back to Newgate Prison to await her execution, and she didn't have to wait long. On the 27th of February 1601, Anne Line was taken to Tyburn, the infamous site of execution, where the then tree, or the triple gallows, stood, which had been made in the decades before Elizabeth's reign. This was a three-pronged gallows, or a triangular gallows, that allowed executioners to condemn more than one person on the structure. In fact, on the 23rd of June 1649, within 50 years of Anne's execution, there were 23 men and 1 woman who were hanged on the gallows of Tyburn Tree. The gallows had become infamous, and Anne was brought to the execution scaffold in a cart. Along with her were 2 priests, Mark Barkworth and Roger Philcock, who had been sentenced to death for heresy and for illegal Catholic worship. But these 2 men had been condemned to be hanged, drawn, and then quartered. This was a much worse fate than a more straightforward hanging, which was imposed upon Anne, as women were not subjected to the multi-step execution method, which resulted in their remains being cut into 4 pieces. But Anne Line remained defiant in her final moments. She was led onto the scaffold and was asked if she wanted to make a speech or say some final words, and she loudly stated to the witnesses gathered around the tree that, "I am sentenced to die for harbouring a Catholic priest, and so far I am from repenting for having done so. That I wish with all my soul that where I have entertained 1, I could have entertained 1,000. She was then handed over to the executioner, who tied a noose around the Tyburn tree and then secured this around Anne Line's neck. He either forced her to stand on a box, which was then kicked out, or he more sadistically pulled down on his end of the rope and suspended her in the air, choking the life out of her until she was dead. Anne was around 38 when she died on the gallows. Today, Anne Line is considered a saint, and she was beatified by Pope Pius XI on the 15th of December, 1929. But she was later canonised and is recognised as one of the 40 martyrs of England and Wales, and shares a feast day with a number of other female saints such as Margaret Clitheroe, who was pressed to death, and Margaret Ward. Anne was rather sick and ill when she was taken to the gallows and the tree, and she was found guilty of a crime of sheltering and harbouring Catholic priests. This was a very serious crime inside of Queen Elizabeth's nation, but within a couple of years the Queen would be dead. But Catholics did not gain any sense of greater leniency with their religion for many years. What is shocking is that Anne Line's body, following her execution, was then thrown inside of a common grave with others who were executed that day. However, her body may have then been rescued by the Countess of Arundel, who stated that she was a constant and courageous defender of the faith. The Countess then brought her body to her own house, where it was then claimed that she was buried with dignity by members of the Catholic community, but the whereabouts of her body is not known. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.